Hi everybody, it's Honest John again. When the U.S. began its war in Afghanistan, it really wasn't much of an invasion. We provided air power, and we embedded a small number of Special Forces troops with groups like the Northern Alliance and other local warlords, and basically they fought the Taliban with our help. And that was all that was needed to drive out Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. But it wasn't a victory, actually, because they just fled over the border into Pakistan. In order to achieve a complete victory, we would have had to actually invade those areas of Pakistan, which I don't think the Pakistanis would have taken too kindly to. So instead of being a nominal ally, they would have been an enemy. So that would have taken a lot of troops. That would have taken, a couple of million? So what we did was we settled for nation building in Afghanistan. The troops that went into Afghanistan, most of them came there after the so-called war was over. It turned out that the war was just beginning, but we decided we were going to do nation building, which never works. We increased the number of troops, but it never was enough to control the whole country. And so the Taliban was never really defeated. So what's going to happen when we end our combat role there is completely unpredictable. I mean, we've been training troops there for a long time, just like we did in Iraq, and the Iraqi troops obviously didn't hold their own against ISIS, so it's a real iffy question whether the Afghani troops can hold their own against the Taliban. When we invaded Iraq, General Shinseki predicted that we needed 500,000 troops to actually control the country. But Donald Rumsfeld, the worst defense secretary in history, insisted it could be done with about 150,000 troops. And even when we did the surge, the numbers never came close to that 500,000 number that was actually needed. So the surge, we were able to sit on the violence for a second, but we weren't really able to solve any problems there. So Iraq remained chaotic while we were there, and that chaos never stopped. It continued long after we left. So now we're fighting ISIS in both Iraq and Syria. And we're using air power alone to do that, hoping that ground troops will somehow magically be created by the Syrian opposition and the Iraqi forces. See, all of these conflicts have one thing in common, is that the resources which we have used to try to accomplish the missions there have not been enough to actually do the job. In order to defeat the Taliban, it would have been necessary to conquer both Afghanistan and Pakistan, our nominal ally. In Iraq, we tried to spread democracy on the cheap, and that's turned out to be disastrous. And now we're doing the same thing in fighting ISIS, trying to do as much as possible while investing as little as possible. It's another recipe for disaster. If we were really going to end the terrorist threat in the Middle East, we would have to conquer it from one end to the other. Even some of our allies, we would have to go in and conquer them. For example, we'd have to go in and conquer Saudi Arabia, because they're the source of a whole lot of terrorism, because of the Wahhabi schools which the government sponsors there. We'd have to get rid of that leadership and bring in somebody else. I don't think that would work real well either. I mean, basically what we would have to do is, like I said, conquer the Middle East from one end to the other, which would mean we'd have to reinstitute the draft. We'd have to raise taxes to almost unprecedented levels in order to support that. So I'm obviously not saying that this is something that we should do. What I'm saying is that we need to be a little bit more realistic about what we can do, especially with the resources that we're willing to commit. We have a lot less control over what happens outside our borders than we think we do. The world will not bend to our will. If we continue to pretend that we can do all this stuff, we'll only continue to blunder around in the Middle East and elsewhere, doing a lot more harm than good. Thanks for listening.